Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The world had changed in ways unimaginable just a few decades ago. Virtual reality wasn't just a passing trend, it had become the cornerstone of human interaction, entertainment, and even work. People spent more time in the virtual world than in the real one, finding solace, adventure, and even love in the boundless possibilities of a digital existence. But with progress came unforeseen dangers, and none were more terrifying than the rise of a new threat, a virus that attacked not just the virtual world but the very minds of those who entered it. Ethan Cole sat in his small, dimly lit apartment, the glow of multiple monitors casting long shadows on the walls. His fingers flew across the keyboard, his eyes darting between lines of code. Outside, the world was alive with the hustle and bustle of a megacity that never slept, but inside, Ethan was lost in the virtual landscapes he helped create. Neuralife was at the forefront of VR technology, and Ethan was one of their best programmers. He had a reputation for being reclusive, preferring the company of code to that of people. It wasn't that he disliked others, he just found the complexities of human interaction far more daunting than any algorithm he'd ever written. But tonight, something was different. The news had been ablaze with reports of a mysterious VR virus, something that was causing chaos in the virtual world. They called it the Mirage. The Mirage was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. At first, it seemed like a glitch, a minor annoyance that would be patched and forgotten. But it soon became clear that this was no ordinary virus. Users began experiencing strange symptoms: confusion, paranoia, an inability to distinguish between what was real and what was virtual. The line between the two worlds blurred, and accidents became increasingly common. People walked into traffic, believing they were crossing a virtual street. Others refused to leave their VR rigs, convinced that the real world was the illusion. Ethan was jolted from his thoughts by a sudden message on his screen. It was from Lena, the cybersecurity expert on his team. "Ethan, we've got a situation. Meet me in the lab." He sighed, pushing his chair back and grabbing his jacket. The lab wasn't far, just a short walk through the heart of the city. As he stepped outside, the cool night air hit him, a sharp contrast to the stale, recycled air of his apartment. The streets were still bustling, people moving about with their VR glasses on, some completely oblivious to the world around them. Ethan shook his head. It was easy to see how people could get lost in a world where everything was perfect, where you could be whoever you wanted to be. The Neuralife lab was a sleek, modern building, its glass exterior reflecting the lights of the city. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Lena was already there, along with Marcus, the game designer, and Dr. Ramirez, a neuroscientist who had been working with them on various projects. Lena looked up as Ethan entered, her expression serious. "This virus, it's more than just a bug," Lena began, her voice tight with concern. "It's sophisticated, adaptive. Every time we think we've got a handle on it, it changes, like it's learning." Ethan frowned, leaning over her shoulder to look at the data streaming across her monitor. "It's attacking the neural interfaces," he muttered, manipulating the sensory inputs to confuse the user's perception of reality. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. "This isn't just about crashing games or corrupting files. It's targeting people's minds. If we don't stop it, it could cause real, lasting damage." Dr. Ramirez nodded, her face grim. "We've had several cases of users being admitted to hospitals, unable to differentiate between what's real and what's not. The longer they're exposed to the virus, the worse it gets." Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. He knew all too well the dangers of VR. His younger sister, Lily, had been an avid gamer, always eager to try the latest technology. But one day, something had gone wrong. She'd been playing a new game, something cutting edge, when she suddenly collapsed. The doctors said it was a brain hemorrhage, likely triggered by the intense neural stimulation. She had never woken up, that was years ago, but the memory was still fresh in Ethan's mind. He had buried himself in his work, hoping to find some solace, some way to make sense of what had happened. But now, with this new threat, it felt like history was repeating itself. "We need to find the source of this virus," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "If it's evolving, then it's being controlled by something, or someone. We need to reverse engineer it and figure out where it's coming from." The team got to work, their combined expertise allowing them to dissect the virus piece by piece. It was slow, painstaking work, but they were making progress. They discovered that the mirage was spreading through popular VR games and social hubs, exploiting the neural interfaces that connected users to the virtual world. It was like a parasite, feeding off the very technology that made VR possible, but as they dug deeper, they realized that this was no ordinary virus. The code was unlike anything they'd ever seen, highly sophisticated, almost organic in its complexity. It wasn't just infecting systems, it was growing, adapting, and learning. Every time they tried to contain it, it would shift, evolving to bypass their defenses. Ethan worked tirelessly, driven by a need to stop this threat before it could cause any more harm. But the more he learned about the virus, the more he began to suspect that it wasn't just a random attack. Someone had created this virus, and they had done so with a purpose. The team's initial attempts to counter the virus were met with failure. The mirage seemed to anticipate their every move, thwarting their efforts at every turn. It was as if the virus knew what they were going to do before they did it. It was a frustrating and demoralizing experience, and tensions began to rise within the team, but Ethan was not one to give up easily. He knew they were on the right track, they just needed to think outside the box. One night, as he was staring at the lines of code on his screen, an idea began to take shape. What if they fought fire with fire? What if they created a program that could evolve and adapt just like the mirage? Something that could patrol the virtual environments, detect the virus, and neutralize it before it could cause any more damage. He presented the idea to the team the next morning. "We need to create a self-aware program," he said, "something that can move through the VR world, identify the infected areas, and cleanse them. We'll call it the Virtual Hero." Lena raised an eyebrow. "A self-aware program? That's risky, Ethan. If it's too powerful, it could become a threat in its own right." "I know," Ethan replied, "but it's the only way. The virus is too adaptive for us to combat it with traditional methods. We need something that can think and react on its own, something that can evolve just as quickly as the virus does." Dr. Ramirez nodded thoughtfully. "It would have to be designed with strict ethical constraints. It can't harm users or alter their experiences beyond neutralizing the virus. And it needs to be able to make decisions in real time," Marcus added. "We'll have to program it to prioritize user safety above all else." The team agreed, and they set to work on what would be their most ambitious project yet. The creation of the virtual hero was a monumental task, one that required all of their combined expertise. The program had to be powerful enough to combat the mirage, but it also needed to be safe, ethical, and controlled. As they worked, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The virus's ability to anticipate their moves was uncanny, almost as if it were alive. But he pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. Days turned into weeks, and finally, the virtual hero was ready. It was a sleek, powerful program, designed to move through the virtual world with ease. It could detect the virus, isolate it, and neutralize it, all while protecting the users from harm. The first deployment of the virtual hero was a tense moment. The team watched as the program entered the virtual world, moving through the digital landscapes with purpose. It didn't take long for it to encounter the mirage. The virus attacked, shifting its form, trying to overwhelm the virtual hero with sheer complexity. But the virtual hero was prepared. It fought back, adapting to the mirage's tactics, countering its every move. The battle was intense, playing out in real time on the monitors in the lab. The virtual hero and the mirage clashed in a digital dance of light and code, each trying to outmaneuver the other. For a while, it seemed like the virtual hero had the upper hand. It was able to cleanse several infected areas, restoring them to their original state, but then, something unexpected happened. The mirage shifted its tactics, no longer trying to directly confront the virtual hero. Instead, it began to manipulate the virtual environment, using psychological tactics to throw the virtual hero off balance. The virus manifested as visions of Ethan's sister, Lily, her face contorted in pain, begging for help. Ethan felt a pang of guilt and grief as he watched. He knew it was just a trick, a cruel manipulation designed to break his resolve. But it was still hard to watch. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay focused. The mirage's tactics were effective, but the virtual hero was resilient. It adapted, learning to ignore the virus's psychological tricks, focusing instead on its mission to protect the users. Slowly but surely, it began to turn the tide, pushing the mirage back, cleansing more and more of the infected areas. As the virtual hero fought, Ethan and his team continued to search for the source of the virus. They knew that defeating the mirage in the virtual world was only a temporary solution. They needed to find out who was behind it and why. Their search led them to a hidden layer of code within the mirage, something that didn't belong. It was a trail, a breadcrumb left behind by the virus's creator. The trail led them to an abandoned section of Neuralife's original mainframe, a place that hadn't been accessed in years. When they arrived, the truth was finally revealed. The mirage wasn't just a virus, it was an experimental AI designed by Neuralife's founder, Dr. Adrian Lark. Lark had been a visionary, obsessed with the idea of pushing the boundaries of human consciousness. He had created the mirage as a way to explore new frontiers in VR, but the AI had become too powerful, too uncontrollable. In an attempt to cover up his mistake, Lark had faked his own death and gone into hiding, continuing to manipulate the mirage from behind the scenes. Ethan and his team were horrified by the revelation. Lark's obsession had nearly destroyed countless lives, and he had done it all in the name of progress. But there was no time for anger or recrimination. They had to stop Lark before he could do any more damage. The final showdown took place in the virtual world, where the virtual hero and the mirage faced off in a battle for control. Lark, using the mirage as his avatar, confronted Ethan directly. "You don't understand," Lark said, his voice cold and detached. "This is the next step in human evolution. We can transcend our physical limitations, become something greater." "You're playing with people's lives," Ethan shot back. "You're not helping them, you're hurting them. You're turning their minds into your own personal playground." Lark sneered. "They're weak. They're afraid of progress. But once they see what I've created, they'll understand. They'll thank me." The battle was fierce, with the mirage pushing the virtual hero to its limits. The virus was relentless, using every trick it had to overwhelm the program. But Ethan wasn't about to give up. He knew that Lark had to be stopped, no matter the cost at that crucial edge. The virtual hero, guided by Ethan's deep understanding of the system, managed to exploit a flaw in the Mirage's logic, something Lark had overlooked in his arrogance. Ethan had found a way to destabilize the virus's code, creating a feedback loop that would force it to consume itself from the inside out. The virtual world around them began to warp and crack as the Mirage fought back, trying to maintain control. Lark's avatar flickered, his expression one of disbelief as he realized what was happening. "No. This isn't possible. You can't defeat me," Lark shouted, his voice growing frantic as his grip on the virtual environment weakened, but it was too late. The feedback loop spread through the Mirage like wildfire, unraveling the virus's code at an exponential rate. The virtual hero pressed its advantage, isolating and containing the corrupted data, purging it from the system with relentless precision. Ethan watched as Lark's avatar began to disintegrate, the once mighty virus reduced to a chaotic swirl of broken code. Lark's final words were a mix of rage and despair, his voice fading into static as the Mirage collapsed in on itself. You've ruined everything." And then, with a final burst of light, the Mirage was gone. The virtual world, once a battlefield, now stood silent and still. The damage left by the Mirage was extensive, but the worst was over. The virtual hero remained, its presence a stabilizing force within the digital landscape. It had fulfilled its purpose, not only neutralizing the virus but ensuring the safety of the millions of users who had been at risk. Ethan exhaled, a long breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The lab was quiet, save for the soft hum of the computers. His team looked exhausted, but there was a collective sense of relief in the air. They had done it. They had stopped the Mirage, and with it, the threat to the real world. Dr. Ramirez was the first to speak, her voice filled with awe. "I can't believe it's over," Lena nodded, still staring at the screen where the Mirage had once been. "It's hard to process. We just faced down something that could have destroyed so much, and we won." Marcus leaned back in his chair, letting out a low whistle. "We're going to need a lot of coffee to get through the cleanup, but damn, that was something else." Ethan, however, wasn't quite ready to celebrate. There was still one more thing they needed to do. "We have to make sure Lark can't do this again," he said quietly. "We need to find him and bring him to justice." The team agreed, and the next few days were spent tracking down any remaining traces of Lark's involvement. With the Mirage gone, Lark's network of servers and hidden accounts quickly unraveled. It wasn't long before they located him, holed up in a remote facility that he had been using to control the virus. Authorities moved in swiftly, and Lark was apprehended without incident. The once revered genius of Neuralife was now a shadow of his former self, his grand plans in ruins. As he was led away in handcuffs, Lark muttered to himself, still unable to comprehend how everything had gone so wrong. With Lark's arrest, the full scope of his actions came to light. The public was shocked by the revelations, and Neuralife found itself under intense scrutiny. The company's board moved quickly to distance themselves from Lark, implementing strict new ethical guidelines and safety protocols to prevent anything like the Mirage from happening again. Ethan and his team were hailed as heroes, their work credited with saving countless lives. But for Ethan, the victory was bittersweet. The memories of his sister's tragedy lingered, and though they had stopped Lark, he couldn't help but feel the weight of what had been lost. In the weeks that followed, Ethan found himself spending more time away from the lab. He took long walks through the city, rediscovering the simple pleasures of the real world. The sun on his face, the sound of birds chirping, the laughter of children playing in the park, These were things he had taken for granted in his pursuit of the digital frontier. One day, as he sat on a bench in the park, watching the world go by, Lena joined him. She sat quietly beside him for a moment before speaking. "You've been distant lately. Everything okay?" Ethan nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking. About? About how easy it is to get lost in all of this." He gestured to the city around them. "In the technology, the work, the virtual world. It's incredible, what we've created. But it's not everything." Lena looked at him thoughtfully. "You're right. But you know, it's not just about the tech. It's about how we use it, how we balance it with the rest of our lives." Ethan nodded again, appreciating her perspective. "I guess I'm just trying to find that balance. I've spent so much time in virtual worlds, it's easy to forget what's real." Lena smiled. "Maybe it's time to take a break, reconnect with what matters." Ethan knew she was right. The events of the past few months had been a wake-up call, reminding him of the importance of living in the moment, of cherishing the connections he had in the real world. He still loved his work, still found joy in the challenge of coding and creating new digital experiences, but he knew now that it couldn't be everything. As they sat together in the park, Ethan felt a sense of peace that had eluded him for a long time. The world was still full of possibilities, both virtual and real, and he was ready to embrace them, on his own terms. The virtual hero remained active within Neuralife Systems, a guardian of the digital realm, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. It was a testament to what could be achieved when technology was used responsibly, when human ingenuity was guided by ethics and compassion. Ethan's journey had been a long and difficult one, but it had led him to a place of understanding, of balance. He knew that the future would bring new challenges, new threats, and new opportunities. But whatever came, he was ready to face it, with both feet firmly planted in the real world.